My name is Simon, and what I'm going to tell you has altered my perspective on marriage, love, and myself. For years, I believed I was doing everything right, or at least enough to keep my marriage together. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I compromised, let things slide, and told myself that love meant making sacrifices. But then, one day, I overheard something that shattered every illusion I had. My wife, the woman I shared my life with, said something that made me question if any of it had ever been real, and that was the moment everything changed. I'm going to take you through exactly what happened, step by step, because if I had obeyed the signs earlier, maybe I would have saved myself from years of wasted effort. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about waking up, seeing the truth, and learning when to walk away. If I'm being honest, my marriage to Lillian wasn't something that started with love or even deep attraction. It was arranged. Our aunts were good friends, and they thought we'd be a good match. I didn't have any strong feelings about it at the time. I wasn't the type to go chasing after romance, and Lillian seemed like a decent enough woman. She was quiet, polite, and had a certain elegance that made her seem like she'd be a good wife. So when the family suggested we meet, I went along with it. Our first meeting was awkward. Not because Lillian was rude or anything, but because we were two complete strangers sitting across from each other, trying to act like there was something there. She didn't talk much, and I wasn't sure if that was just her personality or if she wasn't interested. But as time went on, we got used to each other. Conversations became easier, and we learned the basics. Our favorite foods, our thoughts on work, and how we viewed life in general. It wasn't some great love story, but it was comfortable. A year later, we got married. It wasn't a grand emotional event, just a traditional wedding with family, friends, and the usual expectations. Since I'd heard that not all marriages begin with passion, and that sometimes love is something you build, I told myself that as long as we respected one another and worked toward the same future, things would eventually fall into place. I won't lie and say it was perfect, but I thought it was fine. We had a routine. We weren't always fighting. So, I figured maybe love would grow over time. Looking back now, I realize I was lying to myself. One evening, I got home from work exhausted and just wanting to change. As I walked past the bedroom, I heard Lillian on the phone. I wasn't paying attention until I caught her saying, I'd never be with him again. She wasn't angry, just certain, like she had already made up her mind. My chest tightened. At first, I wasn't sure if she was talking about me, but as she kept speaking, it became clear. Something in me just broke. I stood there, frozen. She was on the phone, telling her sister that if she had the chance, she'd never be with me again. It wasn't just that she was unhappy, it was the fact that she regretted being with me in the first place. That realization felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to walk into the room and ask her straight up what she meant. I wanted her to look me in the eye and say it again, but I didn't. Instead, I backed away, careful not to make a sound. I wasn't ready to face whatever truth was waiting for me behind that conversation. So I did nothing. I carried on as if I had heard nothing at all. But from that moment, something changed. I started seeing my wife differently. All the little things I had brushed aside before started making sense. She had always been distant, never really opening up unless I asked her something directly. I used to think she was just reserved, that with time she'd get comfortable and let me in. But now I was beginning to understand. She had never truly let me in, not even from the start, and it wasn't just emotional distance. I noticed how she complained more than usual, how she seemed irritated by things she used to tolerate. It was like she was slowly pushing me away, piece by piece, and I had been too blind to see it. I didn't say a word to her about what I heard. I wanted to, but something held me back. I just wasn't ready to hear it from her directly. I tried to move, past it. So I buried the whole thing deep inside me. I watched her closely in the weeks that followed. And then, one evening, everything became clear. I got off work earlier than usual. I didn't call to let Lillian know I was coming home. I never had a reason to. Our apartment wasn't far, and I was looking forward to just lying down for a bit before dinner. Once I stepped inside, I walked straight to the bedroom, and that's when I saw them. Lillian was in our bed, wrapped in the arms of another man. It was like my mind was lagging behind reality. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't even notice me at first. Then, something inside of me snapped. I didn't think. I just moved. I lunged at him. I don't even remember my fist hitting his face before he could react, but my wife's lover grabbed the first thing he could. He stumbled back, trying to shield himself, not expecting a fight. He struggled to free himself, panicking as I hit him again. Then, like a coward, he shoved past me, ran out of the room, grabbed his clothes, and fled through the front door, as if his life depended on it. For once, I didn't argue, because I already knew. I took one last look at Lillian. This woman I had worked so hard to love and make happy, and then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "You're free to be with him, because this marriage is over." I turned to Lillian, expecting, I don't know, fear, regret, maybe even an apology, but no. Instead of guilt, she was angry at me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed. "You had no right to hit him." That was it. I gathered some of my things, just enough to last a few days. I left that house without giving it a second glance. I checked into a small hotel. I needed a place to stay. The room was simple, but more importantly, it was far from her. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. My thoughts ran over everything that had happened up until this point, and for the first time in years, I finally saw the truth. I had told myself that things would get better and that she would realize how hard I was trying, but no amount of work could undo what had never been real in the first place. I reached for my phone, not really expecting anything, but I checked it anyhow. There were no calls or messages. She wasn't going to fight for this or even pretend to care that I was gone. Silence spoke louder than words, and I knew what needed to be done. If I had any remaining doubts about where I stood in her life, they died right then. I launched my browser, looked up divorce attorneys, and selected the first one with an open appointment. I was done. I remember sitting across from my lawyer, hardly paying attention as he went over the paperwork, because my thoughts were elsewhere. The divorce was proceeding quickly. I didn't even consider the price. It didn't matter. I wasn't about to spend another second in a marriage where I was unwanted. The moment the confirmation email arrived, I exhaled with a sense of finality that I hadn't felt in a long time. Lillian hadn't contested anything, which told me all I needed to know. She wanted out just as much as I did. But in the middle of everything, I found out something that made my stomach turn. The man I had walked in on, the one I swung at in pure rage, wasn't just some random guy. He was her ex. The same ex she once told me was toxic, abusive, and controlling. The same man she claimed she would never go back to. Yet there she was, sneaking around with him behind my back. I couldn't believe how blind I had been. In the beginning, Lillian had painted this guy as a monster. She told me he used to manipulate her, that he never respected her boundaries, and that she was grateful to be in a stable, loving relationship with me. And like a fool, I believed her. I thought I was the safe choice, the man who would treat her right, the one who wouldn't hurt her like he did. But looking back, I started to question everything. If he was so terrible, why did she run back to him the moment she had the chance? Had she ever really left him? Or had I just been the backup plan, the guy she settled for when she wanted something comfortable? The truth hit me hard. She never loved me. She probably liked the idea of me, the security, the stability, the way I bent over backward to make her happy. But love? That was never in the equation. And the worst part? I had seen the signs. They were right in front of me the whole time. Yet I ignored all of it, convincing myself that love was something that grew over time. I thought if I was patient, if I just tried harder, she'd see how much I cared, and she'd finally love me back. But love doesn't work like that. UDO. Don't have to convince someone to love you. You don't have to prove your worth to a person who genuinely wants to be with you, and yet that's exactly what I had done. I had lowered my standards and accepted less than I deserved just to keep. Someone who didn't even want to be kept. That realization stung more than the betrayal itself, because in the end, Lillian wasn't the only one to blame. I had done this to myself. I had chosen to stay blind when the truth was staring me in the face, and that was something I would never let happen again. When the divorce was finalized, I didn't waste time, looking back. I wanted to move on, rebuild, and put everything behind me. As a few months went by, I began to hear from mutual friends that Lillian wasn't doing as well as she probably expected. At first, I wasn't interested. Her life wasn't my problem anymore. But then, someone casually mentioned that the same man she cheated on me with was now beating her over the smallest issues. Lillian had run straight into the arms of the man she betrayed me for, probably thinking she had won, that she had traded up, that she had escaped a marriage she never wanted in the first place. I paused. I won't lie, it caught my attention. This was the same woman who had sat across from me, looked me in the eyes, and told me stories about how toxic he was, how he used to yell at her, control her, and make her feel like she was nothing. And now, she had willingly gone back to him. The more I heard, the clearer it became. History was repeating itself, but this time, I wasn't the one trying to fix things. He had her under his thumb, dictating her every move. She couldn't go out when she wanted. She had to explain herself for the smallest things, and when he got angry, he didn't just shout. He hit her, and from what I was told, it was happening often. People expected me to have some kind of reaction. Maybe anger, maybe pity, but I felt nothing. No sadness, no sympathy, no satisfaction either. Just nothing. She knew exactly what she was walking into, and she did it anyway. I wasn't her husband anymore, and honestly, I had no interest in whatever storm she had thrown herself into. She made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. Over a year later, life had moved on, and so had I. But then, out of nowhere, a message popped up on my phone. It was Lillian. "Hey, I know I don't deserve to ask this, but can we talk?" I just stared at it. After everything, she had the nerve to reach out like we were old friends who had lost touch. I didn't respond, because I didn't care. But she didn't stop there. Over the next few days, more messages followed. "I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I was selfish. I took your love for granted. You didn't deserve that. Please, Simon, just say something." I could almost hear her voice as I read her words. But they didn't stir anything in me. She had broken me down, piece by piece, by making me question my worth. Back then, I would have done anything to make her happy. I had spent so much time thinking, if I love her harder, if I try more, she'll finally see me. But she never did. And now? Now, she wanted forgiveness. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because her apology didn't make up for the nights I stayed up wondering why I wasn't enough. It didn't fix the damage she had left behind. And so I let her words sit there, unanswered. Just like she had left my love, unappreciated. If there's one lesson I want you to take from my story, it's this. Never settle for a love that isn't reciprocated. I spent so much time trying to be a good husband, believing that if I just did a little more, she would appreciate me. But love doesn't work that way. If someone doesn't genuinely want to be with you, no amount of effort will change that. I ignored the signs, telling myself that things would get better. But ultimately, I was just postponing the inevitable. Her lack of effort, her emotional remoteness, the fact that she never truly opened up to me. I convinced myself she just needed time. But deep down, she was never invested. And when people aren't invested, they eventually leave, whether it's physically or emotionally. Looking back, I see now that I was the only one holding on to something that was never real. So if someone doesn't value you, walk away before they destroy you. Staying in a one-sided relationship drains you in ways you don't even realize. You lose yourself trying to make someone else happy, and in the end, they still leave. Or worse, they betray you. The day I walked away was the day I started to rebuild myself. And trust me, nothing feels better than finally putting yourself first. That's it for today's story. If you found this relatable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.